Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. So we are continuing our discussion on Śrī Īśopaniṣad with mantra 12. Annam tamaha praveshanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yav sambhutyam rataha. Those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute. So we'll notice that 9, 10 and 11 and 12, 13 and 14, they're actually almost identical mantras with just one word that is changed, right? So let's see. So this is mantra 12 and mantra 9. So we see first line, Andam Tama Pravashanti is the same. In mantra 12, then they say, Ya Sambhutim Upasate. There it is, Ya Vidyayam Upasate. So the word Avidya is replaced by Asambhuti. Third line is exactly the same, Tato Bhuya Evate Tamo. And in the fourth line, the Yav Vidyayam Rata, the Vidyayam is replaced by Sambhutyam. Right? So Vidya and Avidya, they point to knowledge and ignorance, and Sambhutam and Asambhutam point to the absolute and relative. Right? So here, and this will happen in all the other verses. But essentially, the mantra is basically saying that those who follow the Sambhutam and the Asambhutam, both of them andha tava pravishyanti. Same, they both follow the same structure. Okay, so we are in the third section where we are talking about mantras 9 to 14, which was talking about the right and wrong practices, right? So 9 to 11 was talking about the right and wrong vidya. 12 and 14 are going to talk about the right and wrong upasana, or the right and the wrong ways of worship, right? And because there is a strong correlation. By the right knowledge, one worships the right entity, and by the wrong knowledge, one worships something that is wrong. So that's why the mantras are strongly correlated. So recap, in the first mantra, Śrī Īśopaniṣad spoke about God, right? Ishavāsyamidam sarvam, right? So we say Krishna because we understand God to be Krishna, but Īśopaniṣad spoke about Isha or God. Mantra 2 talked about the advantages of living in the Ishavāsyam consciousness. Right? Basically, only enjoying the quota that has been set aside for you, understanding who that quota belongs to. Right? And they say that in this way, one can live for a very, very long time. Essentially, mantra 2 is talking about nishkam karma, how to act without reactions. Mantra 3 presented the contrary view, the Atma, which is a person who is sakami, who is enjoying, considering himself to be the cause of the enjoyment, and they say the destination of this person is the darkest regions of ignorance, which is either the hellish planets or which is the consciousness that is covered by ignorance. So the word Atma, or the killers of the soul, is in plural, which means there are different kind of killers of the soul, and they are described in mantra 9, 10 and 11. As well, they will be described in mantra 12, 13 and 14. Right? So the first three mantras deal with Vidya and Avidya, which is Jnana and Karma. The second three mantras, 12 to 14, deal with Sambhuti or Sambhav and Asambhuti, which is the difference between absolute and relative. Right? And just like the definition of Vidya and Avidya changed, the definition of Sambhuti and Asambhuti will also change as we go from mantra 12 to 13 to 14. So a summary explanation of mantra 12. Relative means that which is not independent or dependent on something. Right? Krishna is the only Sambhuti. He is the only independent. Everything else is Asambhuti. This is kind of giving the conclusion of the three mantras. Essentially, this is mantra 14, but I'm presenting it here because we'll move back from here. But finally, the three mantras together will tell us that Krishna is the only supreme independent, everything else is dependent. And if one confuses the two, one will fall down. So mantra 2 is specifically talking about aparadharma, or the lower form of faulty religion, where both the objects of worship are relative. The asambhuti is of course relative, even the so-called sambhuti is relative. Right? So asambhuti in mantra 12 refers to the demigods, and sambhuti refers to the impersonal absolute. Okay. So the sambhuti is the Brahman, or the impersonal feature. Now it's called absolute because it is beyond matter. Right. So the Brahman is a spiritual feature. It is absolute relative to matter, but nevertheless it still causes the fall down because it's the partial realization. Right. So trying to draw a parallel between the two mantras. So mantras 9 to 11, we saw the evolving definition of Vidya. So in verse 9, avidya was essentially whimsical work without knowledge by the muras, the karmis and the vikarmis. Just sense gratification. That was avidya. And vidya was mental speculation without working or impersonalism. Right? So vidya was essentially gyan without karma. Right? Trying to develop knowledge to exploit the material nature, or trying to develop knowledge for making impersonal realization. So now we can see the parallel. So vidya in mantra 9 was developing knowledge for impersonal Brahman. So the destination in mantra 12 is the Brahman. The avidya in mantra 9 was sense gratification. The destination in mantra 12 is demigods. So people who have that kind of knowledge worship those kind of entities. Then proceeding in mantra 10, both avidya and vidya of mantra 9 was combined under avidya, and vidya was presented as vigyan, as somebody who is pursuing knowledge with work, somebody who's pursuing transcendence, right? And this can also lead to Krishna consciousness. This is also an aspect of varnashram dharma. And in mantra 11, varnashram dharma was considered avidya because it was that which is not bhakti, and vidya was bhakti. So we see how vidya and avidya change over the three mantras. So this is further definition of avidya, vidya, which we have already completed. So tabular display that mantra 9, avidya is the ignorant pursuit of sense gratification, karma without gyan. Vidya is the knowledge for pursuing sense gratification or liberation, which is gyan without karma. Mantra 10, avidya was knowledge for pursuing sense gratification or knowledge for pursuing Brahman, and vidya was knowledge for pursuing transcendence. Right? So karma without gyan, gyan without karma in mantra 9. In mantra 10, either karma or gyan without one another, and vidya in mantra 10 is karma along with gyan or vigyan. Mantra 11 was knowledge of body maintenance, which is similar to vidya in mantra 10, that is manifested as the practice of varnashram dharma, and knowledge for the pursuit of Krishna consciousness or bhakti is presented as vidya in mantra 9. Right? Now we can see the parallel then, the 12, 13 and 14. So 12 is the worship of devas, right? So those who pursue sense gratification worship the devas. Those who pursue knowledge just for the sake of knowledge, they worship Brahman. Then in mantra 10, we talked about karma or gyan without one another. And the asambhutim in mantra 13 is anything other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Devas and the Brahman worshipped in the previous mantra are asambhutim in mantra 13, and sambhutim is Krishna, right, which is knowledge with transcendence. Then in mantra 11, with avidya was varnashram dharma, and in mantra 14, asambhutim is vinashanam. Vinashanam is the material world, and sambhutim is the spiritual world. Right? And of course, we will cover each of it as we do dig deeper. But I wanted to give you a roadmap of how these three mantras in section 2 relate to the three mantras in the section 1 of the third part of the Īśopaniṣad. So in mantra 9 and 11, we were told how we can elevate or degrade ourselves based on how we study and what we act. Mantra 12 to 14 will tell us how we can elevate or degrade ourselves in terms of whom we worship, where we place our faith. So we previously talked about activity and knowledge. Now we will discuss about the object of worship. So what are the different objects of worship? The demigods, the impersonal Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and anything else, like the other devas, human beings. Right? So these are the various sambhutim and asambhutim that we will discuss in these three mantras. And as we established, there is a correspondence between 9, 10, 11 and 12, 11, 14. Right? So in a general way, the advancement is in 9, 10, 11. The lowest level is use of intelligence for sense gratification, and such people worship either devas or other human beings or other things. Somebody worship stones or trees or whatever, but other things. Then better than them are the mental speculators. They worship the personal Brahman, and better than them are the people who have the knowledge of the Vedanta and they worship Krishna. So analysis of the purport by Prabhupada. Prabhupada starts off with an interesting point that even the devas and rishis, they misunderstand the absolute truth to be impersonal, right? So why is those who follow Vidya, why do they worship? Why do they worship the impersonal? Because it is difficult to understand that the impersonal is not the independent truth, right? It may be the absolute truth, but it's a dependent absolute truth. And then Prabhupada talks about how demigod worship stay in the dark material world, and how the final 7 to 10 paragraph, he talks about how the impersonalists are even worse, because not only do they go to the darkest region of hell, they take the others along with them also. Now, the darkest region of hell is not the hell as we understand it, but staying in the impersonal Brahman is hell for the soul. Because the soul's natural position is to enjoy with Krishna. When that position is taken away, it is as if it is in hell. So, understanding this with respect to metaphorical story. So there's a story of a king who had a prince. The king was very fond of the prince, but the prince, when he grew up, he became rebellious, and he says that I do not want to be with you, the king, because I have to live by your rules, and you are the only king, and everybody else has to bow down to you. So I'm going away. So he left the kingdom, but because he still had to get sustenance, he took shelter of some other personality. Right? So now this is equivalent to a jiva saying, I don't want to be Krishna, leaves the spirit soul and goes and takes shelter of some other semi-god or semi-god. Somebody saying, I am God. So what was the motivation? Rebellion. Just envy. Envy was fueling the rebellion. And what did the practice result in? Materialism. The jiva rejected the position of Krishna and began to worship the material aspect of his energy. Then the king is still fond of the prince, so he sends his minister over and saying, this prince is suffering, so help him somehow. And the minister himself is also powerful, So he goes to the prince and he says, come on, instead of worshipping this, this useless person, you worship me and I will give you wealth. And the minister had wealth because the king had given him wealth. So this is like the Jivas now taking worship of the Deva. Motive is still the same now. He still has that motive of rebellion, still wants wealth, right? And this is the practice of Karma Kand, when the Jivas worship exclusively the Devas for material enjoyment. Then the minister told the prince that even though you think I'm powerful, there is somebody that is more powerful than me, and he can actually give you more wealth than I can give you. So the prince was greedy, and he said, okay. Right. So this is like the Jiva. Now they are understanding that even the Devas are dependent on Krishna. If Devas can give me so much, Krishna can give me so much more. So they start worshipping Krishna for wealth. Right. So this is the practice of Sakam Bhakti. They're worshipping Krishna as Bhakti, but Sakam, with material desires. And ultimately, even though the Jiva was, the prince was now again back to the king, but now he was able to restore his original position as the son of the king, which is like the Jiva restoring his original position with Krishna. And now the Jiva started worshipping Krishna, but the only motive is love. And this is the state of Shuddha Bhakti. Right? So these mantras in the Īśopaniṣad, they take us through these stages of gradual advancement. So it talks about the worship of the Devas. So I put this mantra here. It's in the Kali Santaran Upanishad. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Iti Shodashkam Nam Kali Kalam Kamshanashanam. Nati Paratropaya Sarve Desha Drishyatu. I put it basically because of the last line. So this is Narad Muni asking Brahma that in this cage of Kali, what is the hope for people? And Brahma recites the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and he says, Iti Shodashkam Nam, that this 16-word name mantra, Kali Kalam Shanashanam, will destroy all the suffering in the age of Kali. And then Brahma then says, how do I know that? Nat Paratrupaya Sarve Desha Drishyatu. That after Sarva Vedesha Drishyatu, after studying the entire Vedas, this is my conclusion, right? So it is said that Brahma studied the Vedas 3 times before he came to the conclusion. The first time he studied, he said, okay, I understand. The purpose of Veda is karma. Perform pious activities, enjoy, go to the heavenly planets, right? And then he said, maybe there is more. So he studied it the second time. He said, okay, now I understand. The purpose of the Veda is Gyan. The Upanishads, that you get out of this material world, go into the impersonal Brahman, Om Shanti Shanti. And the third time when he read it, he understood, now I understand. The purpose of the Veda is to guide the Jiva towards Bhakti. Right? So the point is that the Vedas themselves recommend the worship of Devas. Right? So then why is it being condemned? Because of this principle that the greatest enemy of great is good. Sometimes people say that, we'll do this, it is good enough. Right? And that good enough deprives the person of greatness. So the worship of Deva is good, but it deprives the Jiva of greatness. And the greatness is worship of Krishna. So that is why it is condemned. And just like Brahma had to read the Vedas three times, even for others, and Brahma is the greatest intellect, others it is difficult to understand Krishna. And Krishna says that himself. Like he says in 10.2 that neither the host of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and the sages. Right? And in Bhagavatam 1.2.26, he talks about, he condemns demigod worship, that those who are serious about liberation are certainly non-envious, and they respect all, yet they reject the horrible and ghastly forms of the demigods and worship only the all blissful forms of the Lord Vishnu and his plenary portions. Right? Now, demigods are not horrible and ghastly, but when compared to the all blissful forms of the Lord, they are horrible and ghastly. Right? So Krishna is the origin of all the powers that he delegates to the devas, sages and mystics. So whatever they have, it may appear fantastic to us, but it is a very, very small drop of the reflection of Krishna's powers. Right? So in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Yajñavakya was asked this question, Kati Deva, how many demigods are there? And he says there are 3003, and he says there are 303, and then he says there are 33, and then he says there is one. Right? And then he answers as if there is no contradiction in the apparently contradictory answer. Why? Because there is one king and many ministers at various levels of seniority. So there is a king, and then the king has an inner cabinet where he has 33 people, and then he has an extended cabinet where he has 303 people, and then he has a bigger government where he has 330 million people. Right? Now saying that this all represents the government, there is no contradiction to it, right? So this represents the Veda, which is a multi-level worship. Now, why is the multi-level worship? Why even present it if it's creating so much confusion? And this is actually two reasons. One is there is a unique concern for the individuality of the worshipper. Not everybody will worship Krishna. Not everybody will worship the Brahman. And not everybody will worship all the devas. So instead of asking the child to jump and pick a flower from the head of an elephant, the elephant bends down and offers the flower to the child. And so it's not that the Vedas do not know the position of Krishna, but they make themselves available. Right? So this is an unparalleled flexibility of the worship. So this is Krishna's glory that says, okay, you have so much of envy for me that you cannot worship me, then worship this form of mine, whether it is the Brahman or the Devas. Right? So much compassion that even a person who is rejecting Krishna is making himself available through different ways. So the question would be that if this is a valid path, why is it sometimes praised and condemned? And again, as we discussed in the previous three mantras, context. So the example is that let's assume two students get 60%. One of them goes back home and the parents are happy. They're saying, okay, we'll take you out for a movie, we'll take you out for dinner, well done. The other one goes and the parent beats him up. What's wrong with you? Right? And the reason is, the first student who got 60%, he was always failing. For him, 60% is a big achievement. The second student who got 60%, he was a topper. He was getting 90%. Right? So, first context, for those who are not even able to live a life free of sin, for them to surrender to the piety of the demigods, it is praised. But for those who are advanced, who are qualified to worship the Lord, for them to worship the demigods, it is contempt. So, understand the text and the context, both. And even the Devas encouraged Krishna Bhakti. So, we have examples of how Lord Shiva, he was a great devotee of, Sripad Vallabhacharya, he was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. And once Lord Shiva came to him and said that if you are you're a sincere devotee, you worship Vishnu. And that's how then Sripad Vallabhacharya started worshipping Lord Vishnu. We see in the Bhagavatam 4th canto how the Prachetas, they went and they saw Lord Shiva and they started worshipping Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva gave them the stotra by which they can worship Vishnu. Another example in Chaitanya Charitamrita is Keshav Kashmiri, who was a great devotee of Saraswati. And he was defeated by Mahaprabhu in a debate, and he goes back and he complains to Saraswati Devi that you are my all in all, you are all powerful, how could you abandon me? And then she said, because just like I am the source of your knowledge, Mahaprabhu is the source of my knowledge. And she guided him to the worship of Mahaprabhu. And then Keshav Kashmiri writes beautiful poems glorifying Mahaprabhu. Chandidas, another example. Like Chandidas used to worship Chandi, worship Durga Devi, but by that worship he became purified and he started worshipping Lord Vishnu. So this is not a message that is unique to Īśopaniṣad. Now all the other scriptures, we read the Bhagavad Gita, gives the same message. Right? In the earlier chapters, chapter 3, Krishna is encouraging the worship of the Devas, where he says that by the performance of yajnas, the Devas are pleased, and then they give the rain, and so in this way the cycle is maintained. Right? But then when he reads 7th and 9th chapters, then he himself starts condemning demigod worship. Right? He calls them alpamedeshu, men of small intelligence, because by then Arjuna is sufficiently advanced in Tattva Gyan to understand the position of Krishna. So here also Annam Tama is mentioned. Annam Tama represents the material world because it is inherently dark. Right? Because in the Bhagavatam it's maintained how the universe is encapsulated in layers after layers of material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and because of that the light of the Brahma Jyoti can never enter into the material world. So there is no natural lightness, there is no effulgence of the Brahman. The lightning within the universe is artificially provided by the Surya, by the sun planet. That is why the material world is called Andam Tama. And outside the material world is the Brahma Jyoti, wherein the Vaikuntha Lokas and the spiritual world is there. Right? So Īśopaniṣad is saying, do not bother with any destination within the material universe. It's not distinguishing between a Brahma Lok or Svarg Lok or Patal Lok. All of them are Andatama. All of them are material. So it's saying, don't worry about any of the destinations in the material world. So that was the Asambhutim. Right? Asambhutim is worship of the demigods. By the worship of the demigods, one gets a material destination. The material destination is Andam Tama, it's dark because it's within the material world. Now Sambhutim is impersonalism. Right? So these are the Aroha Panthas, or those who follow the path of mental speculation. Right? They go through the process of neti, and then they reject matter, they reject spirit, and they come to the conclusion of the formless spirit. Right? So even though it is Sambhutim, it is still a Sambhutim because the Brahman is still dependent on Krishna. Right? So the progression is that in Karma Kand we have the religious materialism who follow the Vedas, the Gyan Kand, they study the Upanishads and follow impersonalism. And then there is those who study the Bhagavad scriptures and they reach the Bhagavan. So impersonalism is present in the Vedas as a means to end. Right? So we see over here that from materialism to spirituality, impersonalism is a step. Right? Now it is a way to transition from matter to Krishna. So when one is completely absorbed in matter, the first step is to reject matter and the second step is to accept spirituality. The problem comes when people accept the path as the destination, not understanding that impersonalism is simply a step in the direction of spiritual personalism. That's why it takes one to the path of confusion. So I wanted to talk a little bit also because essentially impersonalism is mostly practiced as Mayavad. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of Mayavad. So we'll talk a little bit about the medieval spread of Mayavad, then the modern aspects of Mayavad, and the disasters that are caused by Mayavad. So we'll speak a little bit about these three things. So essentially the Mayavad divides reality into Vyavarika, which is accepting all forms and variety as a practical reality. So this is considered to be Mayavad neophyte, one who is now early practitioner for Mayavad, they recognize Vyavaharika, they recognize the varieties of form around them. And then there is the Paramarthika. Paramarthika is the higher level of Mayavad, which they say is the actual reality. Vyavaharika, they say, is practical reality, because this is what you are practically dealing with. But the actual reality that is only perceived by the eyes of the scriptures is Paramarthika. Right? So the Vyavaharika scriptures are meant for materialists, and they present the lower part of the actual realities, and the spiritualists deal with the Paramarthika, which talks about the Brahman. Right? So this in a sense is how the Mayavad works. So Mayavad was actually now, in a way, Mayavad has always existed, but I'm talking more from the perspective of the spread of Mayavad. So, at the beginning of the age of Kali, there was a decline in the Vedic culture, mostly because of a decline in the Brahmins there. So Buddhism came to reject this malpractices. Some of the prominent malpractices was animal sacrifice for meat eating. Then the Brahmins made the caste system, and there were other devolutions, misinterpretations. So Buddhism came to reject it. Now, Buddhism presented itself as non-theistic, right? So their position was, do not worry about God. Don't worry about whether He is there or not. It's what you would call people as agnostic now. That we don't know for sure whether there is God. We don't know whether there is no God, but we don't worry about it. That was Buddhism. The later followers of Buddha, they made it atheist, right? So they basically solidified the position, saying that actually there is no God. And then later on, Sripad Shankaracharya came, and he reintroduced the Vedas, because the Vedas speak about God. The Buddhists rejected the Vedas. He reintroduced the Vedas, and he changed the Shunyavadi goal of Buddhism into impersonalism. And because the Buddhism did not acknowledge the presence or absence of God, the destination that they presented was nothingness. And so Nirvana was essentially just ceasing to exist. And Shankaracharya, he reintroduced Vedas, and he said, no, the goal is not Shunyavadi but Brahmavad. Right? The goal is impersonalism. Right? Now, this is what Mayavad was introduced earlier on, that the follow of Gyan to attain Brahman, and over time it got further contaminated. So, what is the present day khichdi of Mayavad? Right? So, using a metaphor of khichdi, that it is cooked. The basis of Mayavad is the grains of impersonalism drawn from Upanishads, which is factual. Upanishads do speak about the impersonal absolute, right? So that is why Mayavad is attractive, because it is based on the Vedas. So the grains are impersonalism. Then it is spiced with nationalism taken from the Indian independence movement. So this is the time of the Brahmo Samaj, and the so many saints who came, Aurobindo Mar, Vivekananda, etc. And they basically introduced the notion of nationalism as a way to take back the control of the Hindu identity from the Britishers, because the Britishers had taken that away by desecrating the Vedas, desecrating the concept of the Vedas, having so-called people who were expert in the Vedas condemn the Vedas. So these thinkers, in order to re-establish the identity of Hindus, they also took the spice of the Indian independence movement, and they added it to Mayavad. So then these concepts of Daridra Narayan came by, that to worship of people is worship of God, etc. Then there is this sugar of social service taken from Abrahamic religions, right? Because if you look at the Abrahamic religions, which is Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, they don't concern themselves much with God. They concern themselves mostly with morality, doing the right thing, serving people, mostly what Bhagavad Gita would describe as piety or mode of goodness, and it manifests as social service, as feeding the poor, helping the sick, etc. So, so people who were helping, they suddenly became saints, and they were canonized there. So that got blended into the khichdi of Mayavad, and all this is cooked with the envy of Krishna, which is the natural position of one who is conditioned. So this is the current state of Mayavad. And when you speak to people, you will see that these different things manifesting at different points of time, right? They will quote the various scriptures saying that, okay, this scripture says that the Lord is impersonal. Then they will bake in the identity of being an Indian. Then they will bake into it the identity of social service. And essentially it will fuel this. It will be fueled by this desire that of not to be the servant of Krishna or the servant of the servant of Krishna, right? So this is how Mayavad is flourishing in these days. So we move in devotee communities, we think Mayavad is not there, but if you look at the general populace in India, I mean, there are again those who do not care, but those who care, more than a majority of them are Mayavads. Some of them may not realize it themselves, but majority of them are Mayavads. And if you speak long enough with them, you will see that these 5 elements of Mayavad will eventually surface. They may not acknowledge that I have envy for Krishna, but it is implicitly presented when you say that just surrender to Krishna. Why should we surrender to Krishna? I have my own intelligence. So it latently, it manifests. And what are the disasters of Mayavad? That they present they present and ignore temporary beliefs. Right? So those who worship demigods, they are set on their path. I want material enjoyments, I will worship the demigods, I will get it. But what the Mayavads are doing, they are bewildering other people also. And they are basically giving the incorrect interpretation. Right? For instance, they ignore the Vedic injunction of Acharya Upasana. Acharya Upasana is taking shelter of a guru, worshipping the guru. Right? And what you will see the Mayavad, if you speak to them long enough, they will say that actually I am the Acharya. I am that the person that I worship is the person in the mirror, right? So they, and these are things that people who have envy to the Lord, it resonates with them, because that's why they came to the material world, right? Yes, why should I worship Krishna when I myself am God, right? And when the Mayavads say that actually you are God, they say yes, you are absolutely right. Right? So they negate the personal conception but promote Panchopasan. Right? So this is the lower form of Mayavad, where they accept varieties. Panchopasan is the worship of the 5 devas: Surya, Lord Ganesh, Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu they worship not as the spiritual form, Lord Vishnu in the material form. Things like they worship Vishnu specifically in a very, very material form, or Lord Shiva or Durga Devi, and these are mostly invented processes, right? They promote deity worship and they negate that the Lord can have a form. So why is Sambhutim condemned more than Asambhutim? Why is impersonalism condemned more than demigod worship? Because derive the soul of his natural taste of bhakti. Right? The demigod worshippers, they are not working at a spiritual level. Right? They are simply working at a material level. But the impersonalists, they go much deeper. They work at a fake spiritual level. And now what they are doing is that they're taking the soul and putting it into a really, really dark place where there is no opportunity to execute bhakti. They make the material life appear more attractive than spiritual, because they sprinkle the spice of pseudo spirituality. So the person says, okay, I am doing meditation, I feel peaceful when I'm doing meditation. I sit in a dark room and I say om for 30 minutes. So they feel very happy about it, because in a way it's the nature of the soul to execute spiritual activities, but these are all misdirected activities. Right? So instead of just keeping the person saying that, okay, these are material activities, now they're giving them activities that appear to be spiritual, but are actually giving them incorrect results. Then they encourage atheism by falling down themselves, because ultimately this impersonalist, uh, uh, most of them fall in the material world only. Like we say, they'll go to the Brahman and fall down from there. That happens, but the majority of them will never reach that stage, because they are working as the position of against the position of the soul. So when they fall down themselves, all the followers also follow them and fall down. Right? So this is why it is more condemned. So what's the conclusion? That both Devopasan and Brahmavad are available in the Vedas. They're presented as a way to make a progress on the journey to bhakti. But when the followers, they take to them as a destination rather than as a means to an end, they're harmful and misleading. And then of the two, which is of demigod worship and impersonal worship, Mayavad is condemned more because they deprive the conditioned soul of its natural propensity to love Krishna. Right? So the Devas, they are worshipping somebody else. So there is some level of humility. So they go to Lord Shiva, they give obeisances, they will sing glories of Lord Shiva, right? So they have some level of humility. But the Mayavadis, they are worshipping themselves, right? So they come from a platform of arrogance. That's why they're condemned even more. So this brings us to the end of our discussion on mantra 12. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.